You're listening to Keith Angle, the host of TGI Sports Talk on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Angle here for... I wrote this backwards this time. It's Jack and Keith. I feel so bad now. I just looked at my heading here, and I hope nobody else is seeing it. I wrote Jack and Keith's Weekend Playbook. It's Jack and Keith's Weekend Playbook, and I want to bring in my co-host, Jack Hirsch, Hall of Fame boxing writer. How are you, Jack?
Yeah, good. I just want to make one thing clear, Keith, and then I'm going to not talk about the controversy again. Why my name is going ahead of yours. I've gotten a little feedback, a little criticism, feeling that you have more on-the-air time. Yours should have gone ahead of me.
No.
I suggested when they were looking for a name to do it in alphabetical order. J goes ahead of K. That's just the way it turned out. So I said, put my name first based on alphabetical order.
You're covering up the heated contract negotiations that we had before we started this show, but that's okay. We understand that. Real quick, guys, I want to welcome everybody on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You can see all the groups that allow us to share it too. Scrolling below, just a quick while we're talking about this, I want to make sure we're live on my Facebook page because we've had a lot of problems there, and we are. Thank you, Facebook. Anyway, Jack, we've ended the first half of the baseball season ended weeks ago. It always kind of makes me laugh that we look at the All-Star game as the halfway point when we're almost 20 games past that. But we've reached the historical halfway point of the season. We'll talk about that a little bit. But before we get there, I want to start in a couple of places we don't normally kick off the show with. But we have Wimbledon's finals, men's and women's, wrapped up this weekend. There's some stories there and obviously some boxing news. Let's start with Wimbledon, where Jannik Sinner wins his first Wimbledon over
Carlos Alcaraz.
Alcaraz, thank you. Sometimes I have trouble with these names that aren't Smith and Jones. I apologize. Winning in 4 sets. Interestingly enough, he had a bet. One of his coaches was leaving, I read this morning, Cahill, and there was a bet before the match that if Sinner actually won, Cahill would let him make the decision whether he stayed or left. So now he may not be losing a coach. So interesting enough, I don't know. There wasn't a lot of excitement on the women's side where Swiatek beat Anamasov from
6-0, a rarity, a complete wipeout.
Shocking.
A complete wipeout, of an American women in the finals. But, when it comes to women's tennis, we'll get to the men because they were the big story today. But Coco Gauff is the big star still in American tennis. I mean, she's won 2 majors already, the U.S. and the French Open. And, there's such a quick turnaround in these major tournaments because before you know it, I mean, next month they're going to be playing the U.S. Open. So these players have a chance at vindication. And maybe we put a bit too much emphasis on the 4 major tournaments, Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, the French Open, and the Australian Open, because those are considered the majors. And something about putting too much emphasis on all 4 tournaments, I never cared for the great deal. It's similar to putting too much emphasis on an athlete's career based on what they did in the Olympics, as well. But with that said, I think we have a new era finally in the tennis world, because for years and years, it was like the big 3, it started out Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, and those 3 dominated. It was like routine. We get to like a finals and we see one of both of them then all the major tournaments. And now I think we're getting back to that maybe with a big 2 with Carlos Alcaraz. He won 2 Wimbledons in a row.
Yeah.
And he beat Jannik Sinner in a great French Open, a legendary French Open, a few weeks back. And Alcaraz won the first set yesterday, but Sinner, the Italian, came back and won the next 3 sets. Hard-fought matches, like you said, to win his first Wimbledon. And I think we're going to have a nice rivalry going forward because they're both very young. They're the marquee players right now. So is it possible we'll have a big two? And are we dismissing Djokovic very quickly? He's 38 years old. He lost in the semis. Okay, there's the Sinner, the eventual winner, and they were competitive sets, losing like 6-4. But, Djokovic just looked a little past it in the semis.
Doesn't he bring some of that on himself, though? Because in his own press conference, he said, I hope this isn't my last match at Wimbledon, much less as a contender. So he brings a little bit of that on himself. And it might be just the heat of the moment after that, losing in the semifinals and knowing he's 38 years old. And, everybody's got their own mortality, right? So did Nadal and so did Federer, as you mentioned.
Well, you know what it is? He said before the Wimbledon tournament, this is my best chance to win another major at Wimbledon. And I remember the late, great, fight manager Cus D'Amato used to talk about athletes. Whenever they speak about retiring, he said, that's a terrible sign because they have one foot out the door. They have an exit plan. They have an excuse to lose immediately. And that excuse is, well, I'm going to retire anyway. If I win, great. If I lose, it's not that big a deal. I mean, the athletes that are trying to hang on and still show they're the best and have that feeling of desperation, they're in a better place athletically than the athletes who are thinking, well, maybe, I could still have one more victory in me. He wouldn't have said that 5 years ago. He would have been horrified, Djokovic, to talk that way. But at age 38, I mean, you're starting to lose something little by little because tennis is quick, bursts and so on. Yeah, and you can only hang on for so long.
Well, you mentioned the new era potentially starting. I've got a couple of follow-ups I want to go to there. As far as the U.S. concerned, it doesn't feel like we've had a contender. Coco Gauff just did win.
She won the French Open. So come on,
Are the men? Well, my question is, as far as somebody winning Wimbledon, dominating, winning multiple majors, are the women? I feel like the women are closer because of Coco Gauff, because of even Anna Movia was here. I'll never say these names right. I feel like they're closer than the men being consistently competitive in major tournaments because I never see these. There's two guys ranked in the top 10, and I never see them in the semis, or maybe there was one in the semis this year. Get to the semis this year.
Yeah.
But we don't see them getting to the finals of these major tournaments, and at least some of the women are getting to the finals and winning. I mean, do you think the women's tennis ahead of men's tennis in the U.S. still?
It
has been for a while.
I mean, you'd have to say so. And but you got Coco Gauff. You got an American who got to the top of the mountain. It's and she has won a couple of majors, and just won one this year. So that should satisfy your craving that you had an American breakthrough. But it's like that in other sports. It's like that in long distance running. The men used to dominate the marathon in the United States years ago with Frank Shorter, Bill Rogers, Alberto Salazar. And then all of a sudden, the Kenyans took over, the Ethiopians, athletes from other countries, East Germany, et cetera, et cetera. It happens. It goes in waves. I mean, we had once the American men when we had McEnroe, Connors, Pete Sampras, who retired a little earlier than he maybe should have with 14 majors. They used to really dominate. But it used to be that way in boxing. The American heavyweight used to be completely dominant. It goes in waves.
But the Americans have had no dominant player on the men's side since Sampras. That's got to be. I don't know how long ago that is. Is it 20 years? I'm not good with time. It feels like at least 2 decades that the women have had the upper hand here over the men.
Well, no, the women haven't been doing so great themselves. I mean, in the United
You had a run with the Williams
I mean,
sisters.
the men haven't been doing badly. You'll get the men who go to the quarterfinals and so on, make a little bit of a run. But like I said, the problem with men's tennis all these years, as far as the United States goes, not having a winner like an Agassi, a Jim Courier, and so on, was the big three. You'd have Roger Federer. He played Andy Roddick 3 years in a row in the Wimbledon finals.
Yeah.
And he beat Roddick 3 years in a row. And one of the matches was like a squeaker. And I think that was the one time it bothered. I don't want to say it bothered Roger Federer to actually win that Wimbledon against Roddick, but he kind of felt terrible for Roddick. Not as bad as Roddick felt for himself, but even what happened, Roddick was telling a story. The tennis players, and I don't know why they have them in the same dressing room next to one another before and after the match. Imagine doing that in boxing.
Yeah.
But after the match was over, and Federer wins a squeaker, heartbreaker for Roddick, depriving him of his first Wimbledon, which he'd never win. And the third year in a row he lost to Federer. Federer's people come in, and Roddick noticed Federer would give him a silent fist bump, but they kept the celebration down. Roddick noticed out of respect to him. Well, they're the Williams sisters. I mean,
yeah,
I should have mentioned that because Serena Williams was the most dominant tennis player of all time, if not the most dominant athlete of all time. The way she dominated her sport, you can't name another athlete in the sport that dominated their category to the point that Serena Williams dominated hers. I'm not talking about who was greater sport for sport. So I don't want comments on Babe Ruth was greater. No, Michael Jordan didn't dominate basketball the way Serena Williams dominated tennis. If you want to start making comparisons of domination, and don't tell me, any football player like Patrick Mahomes. She was in a class of, herself. I wouldn't even call it women's tennis. I call it Serena Williams tennis. That's how great she was. She'd even beat up on her sister Venus after. Well, and Venus was a Hall of Fame caliber player who's just making a comeback. By the way, Venus is, now.
Do you remember? Do you remember a while back, John McEnroe made the comment that she couldn't beat the 70th ranked player? I think it was 700.
700. No, she couldn't. She couldn't.
Yeah.
No, she couldn't. I mean, let's not get carried away, like with the nonsense, because Billie Jean King beat a 52-year-old Bobby Riggs. I mean, keep this in mind that Bobby Riggs annihilated the number one women's tennis player in the world shortly before that in Margaret Court. Yeah. So let's, so come on. It's not going to happen. It doesn't mean position for position, a pound for pound. That's the way we call it, pound for pound. Serena Williams was a greater women's tennis player than, let's say, Djokovic is a men's tennis player, because she was more dominant in her category. You can argue, well, Djokovic had greater competition, but was it because of him having Nadal and Federer there, and Williams being so great that she wouldn't let anyone creep close to her? You always thought of the dream matchup, Martina Navratilova against Serena Williams.
That would have been, and Brian, just to be clear, I don't think Jack's saying Billie Jean King is as good as Serena Williams. He just said she was dominant.
Then what did I say? That why do I get these things distributed to me, Brian? Get out of here.
We sometimes
she wasn't. Can you argue that Billie Jean meant more to women's tennis than Serena Williams? Yeah, probably she did.
Well,
Serena was so dominant, she took the fun out of it. Yeah. That's how great she was. And, and I'll be honest, the Williams sisters, I mean, they've never caught on, with the public, and some people are going to use the angle as a racial thing. I don't want to dismiss that part of it. I'd have to analyze that a little more. But look, Coco Gauff is oozing with charisma, so she isn't going to be deprived of any, marketing, advertisers, coming out to endorse products and so on.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan, he wasn't denied anything on racial grounds. So come on. So I don't want to hear that as being a reason in itself.
We can make an argument that Billie Jean might have been more important to women's tennis than Serena, because she put the game on the map and the purses started coming in then. And
she was more important than Serena to women's tennis.
Yeah.
Serena is the greatest women's tennis player by far. So what someone asked John McEnroe, Keith? This is how it started. He was being interviewed, and they said, is Serena Williams the greatest tennis player of all time? He said, well, the greatest women's tennis player. And they said, well, why not just say the greatest tennis player, period? And he said, no, she's not, because she isn't. He said 700 men could beat Serena. And he said, look, Serena could shut me up, I'm paraphrasing, by just playing them. Just get on the court and play the 100th, best men's tennis player, and let's see what you could do. What? Serena didn't take that challenge smartly because she would lose, but it doesn't diminish how great she is.
I think McEnroe also said, not just calling her out, he also said, then why do we have a men's and women's division? Let them all play each other, and then we'll find out. And Brian saying that Serena could beat one of the men's. maybe one that's not alive anymore, Brian, but not anybody.
No, could I tell you something? Serena, on her best day, you put her against an elite men's tennis player on their worst day, it would be the equivalent of the Brooklyn Cyclones going against the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers would have to have a dreadful game, believe me, to lose to the Cyclones. I mean, and I'm not talking about one game, and I'm talking about best 4 out of 7. I mean, it would be one-sided. On Serena's best day, she could maybe compete to a degree. In other words, not get slaughtered, lose maybe 6-3, the games. Come on. It's not happening. Listen, I'm going to give you a case in point just very quickly. Joan Benoit, when she won the first women's marathon in the 1984 Olympics, TV Guide is writing about the greatest accomplishments, and they said only a handful of the elite men could have beaten her that day. She ran her time 2 hours and 24 minutes and 52 seconds. Now, to show you the idiot that wrote the story that wasn't checked by the idiot editors, the men's best time, the men's winner beat her time by 15 minutes. In other words, the stragglers in the men's marathon would have beaten Joan Benoit that day. The stragglers, the guys who are coming in 60th and 70th, would have beaten her that day.
Good morning, Linda. Good to have you with us. And good morning to everybody else that's here. Danny, Rick, CA, who am I missing? Whatever. Oh, Brian, of course. One last thing on tennis. Do we need a villain? For tennis to really catch hold, we need a villain like Jimmy Connors or John McEnroe.
Yep. Let me give you an example. Nadal and Federer were so great. They spoiled us in the sense they didn't have to have any trash talk.
Right.
And we were so used to them. We would watch their matches and we loved them. But, when Connors played against McEnroe, that rivalry, at one point McEnroe, who, as much of a jerk as he could be, he was very mature in the way he analyzed things. He'd always give credit to opponents, and he would never use false bravado. But he said, I think I'm the number one, tennis player in the world. He's being honest, not bragging. And it was a fair assessment because he was playing great at the time. Connor said, you tell that SOB he'll never be number one as long as I'm around. Can you imagine Nadal saying, I think I'm the best tennis player in the world during his time? Nadal never said that. And Federer would imagine him saying, you tell that SOB he'll never be number one as long as I'm around. That's why we love McEnroe and Connors.
Right.
There was never anyone like them. The back and forth nonsense. The personalities were great. Connors was the most gracious winner you would have. He was a terrible loser, but a very gracious winner. He'd never rub your face in it. McEnroe, for all his faults, he was a gracious loser. He would give tremendous credit to opponents. He was a gracious winner too. He was a bit of a jerk out, off the court, and with the officials, but they let him get away with it. Yeah. McEnroe would get away with what they let him get away with.
Yeah, those guys played great together.
Hey, Danny, what did I say? Oh, the Dodgers. Yeah, the Dodgers are winning the World Series this year, Danny. Don't listen to Brian telling you that the Dodgers in trouble and this and that. The Dodgers are winning the World Series again.
The key takeaway here is you're his reason for getting up at 5 a.m. now, Jack. So that's
that won't last long. I mean, if the Dodgers don't win the World Series, whatever.
Rick is going back to what we were talking about with Billie Jean and her importance to tennis. I agree that this is a good analogy. Joe Namath's importance to football.
It wasn't that Joe Namath was to football. I love Joe Namath. Listen, the Super Bowl would have continued even if the Jets lost Game 3. I know what people were saying. They were thinking of dropping the Super Bowl had the Jets lost.
They were going to
drop already given the name the Super Bowl. They may have realigned things. I mean, the Jets upset was, I guess, the most, historical game in Super Bowl history if we had to talk about a historical game. But it's the same thing that drives me crazy when people say Bird and Magic saved the NBA. Bird and Magic didn't save the darn NBA. Does anyone in their right mind think there'd be no NBA now if it wasn't for Bird and Magic? That is ludicrous.
Wait a minute. I'm gonna try to talk about both these things at the same time. And so don't interrupt me for a second. Joe Namath played and won the most important game in NFL history. That's the only thing I'm saying. I'm not saying he saved or didn't save NFL. And I got in trouble with John Gonzalez, my good friend from the sports authorities, for berating him a little bit, saying he's the most overrated quarterback playing wise in the Hall of Fame. As far as Magic and Bird go, I would argue they did save the NBA because they couldn't even get their finals on live TV. The finals were being played on tape delay here in the East anyway. Well, everywhere now that I think about it. And that changed after Bird and Magic got into the NBA. So I can make an argument that part is wrong.
And truly argument. Oh, okay. I'm waiting for you to be done. I mean.
Yeah, go ahead. Jump in.
The most important game in NFL history was actually before the Super Bowl 1958 when the Colts beat the Giants in overtime.
That's fair.
That was more important than Super Bowl III because even though football had been going on a while, that was the first game really brought to the television. And that was a big hit. And then we had the NFL became more popular. As far as Bird and Magic saving the NBA, keep this in mind. It was on tape delay when Magic and Bird were rookie, the finals, when the Lakers beat the Sixers for the NBA championship. The finals on tape delay.
That was last year.
Yeah, that was his rookie year, Magic. A few years later, Michael Jordan comes into the league. Eventually, a few years later, the NBA was going to take off with Michael Jordan regardless.
They wouldn't even let
you want to argue Magic and Bird more important to the NBA than Michael Jordan. That's a fair argument. I can go along with that argument, okay, if you want. But the NBA was going to be fine. It was going to take off at some point. I don't want to hear that they saved it. Okay, I heard this same nonsense. Muhammad Ali, oh, no one's going to care about boxing as soon as I leave and this and that. Well, the sport was going on before Ali got there and continued when he left. I mean, sometimes you get mega superstars that elevate a league a lot at that moment. That happens. But let's not create a narrative that wouldn't have happened. Oh, Eli Nastase, yeah, he wasn't a great player. He was Jimmy Connor's buddy, Danny.
He was good.
His personality. Connors couldn't beat Eli early in his career. And when Connors made that run, they did the documentary 30 by 30 at the age of 39, going to the semifinals.
Yeah.
The buzz it created, the way the crowd got, behind them. I think we want favorites that we like seeing year after year after year. And, and I mentioned before Pete Sampras, 14 majors, and he retired a little early. And no one talks about him as one of the all-time greats, but arguably he's the greatest American tennis player, of all time.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've covered a lot of ground here to talk about Wimbledon. That's interesting. I love that when we go off on these tangents because it's good back and forth. But I want to switch up a little bit. Let's go to boxing because we talked about on Friday that we had some interesting matchups. We'll start with the men and Shakur Stevenson, and he had a TKO against who did he fight this week?
No. He won a decision in his fight.
My bad decision. I was looking at something else. It's a Zapata he fought, and I know that there's some conversation about Stevenson and how good he is. Did he show you what you needed to see from him in this fight?
Well, the fight unfolded exactly the way I thought I did. There wasn't an iota of a surprise to me at all. Stevenson was going to win the fight by a very wide margin, and he did. I mean, nothing. There wasn't even 1% of this fight that surprised me. That's how predictable it was. We knew he was going to stand in the pocket a little more, exchange punches, dominate. He's a level above William Zapata. Zapata's a very good fighter in that he throws a ton of punches. He's a volume fighter. Shakur Stevenson's not a big puncher, never been one. He's like a shutdown fighter. Guys like him, Pernell Whitaker, Floyd Mayweather, they shut down opponents' attacks. He's masterful at doing that. And to me, Shakur Stevenson was, one of the best fighters pound for pound going into this fight. And he, he still is, and he's going to be that for years to come. He's a great, great fighter, but he's never going to be that exciting because he doesn't, he's not a wide open puncher where he's going to unleash combinations the way a Sugar Ray Leonard will. So he's methodically going to pick his opponents apart. That's what he does. He does it in a methodical way. And, I like to do an analogy like comparing pitchers, for example. Shakur Stevenson is the equivalent of a Mariano Rivera. He shuts down opponents. And then the guys I'll mention, like past greats like Sugar Ray Leonard, they were the equivalent of a Roger Clemens. You'll see a little more of them, with the blazing fastball and so on. And, people watch. And, if it's boxing needs another Ali, obviously another Ali be welcome. What the problem is, Rick, with boxing? You got these miserable personalities in the sport. It's a gutter sport. The fights itself, great fights are wonderful to see, great matchups. We love that. That's what keeps me interested. But the way the sport is run and the personalities involved, it's disgusting. It's disgusting to listen to these guys. And in a way, it's demeaning to listen to these guys. Even Shakur Stevenson, he had a great moment after the fight. Okay, he could have boasted about his performance, saying, "You see, I showed everyone." But you know what he does for his critics? He sticks out his finger and says "F you" to all of them in a vulgar fashion. He sounded like a thug, Shakur Stevenson. I'm not saying he is one. Don't get me wrong. He sounded vulgar, absolutely vulgar. You listen to Devin Haney and his dad. It's disgusting to listen to the two of them. Absolutely disgusting. You listen to Edgar Berlanga on the show. What bothered me about Edgar Berlanga going into the fight? The way he's talking like a hoodlum, this and that, with all his jewelry, throwing money at that Oscar De La Hoya, saying he wants De La Hoya to be his woman and this and that. Berlanga didn't have the talent to back anything up. At least Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney are exceptional fighters. Berlanga was never that. And I've been telling Frank Laterzo that the last couple of years. And now Laterzo tonight is going to get on there and say, well, I didn't think he was that good. And I told Laterzo that Berlanga going the distance with Canelo Alvarez isn't a boost that Berlanga's so good. Okay? It's just how much Canelo has slipped. Berlanga was better than I thought. You want to know why? Against Canelo, I acknowledge that. You want to know why? Because I thought Berlanga was awful. And I upgraded him to below average based on that performance.
Mm-hmm. It's funny what you were talking about, the gutter sport element of boxing. Just to touch on that for a second, you mentioned Frank. I came across a comment he put up on social media a couple of days ago, and I apologize, Frank, because I'm going to paraphrase, but I think he was talking about just the state of boxing itself is chasing. It's got a guy like him who's a lifer, ready to just give up the sport. I mean, is that happening to longtime guys like Frank, like yourself, Jack? I mean, do you see yourself ever walking away from the sport?
Well, Frank's not walking. Frank's addicted to it. Don't listen to him. He's the king of buying pay-per-view shows that aren't worth getting. So Frank loves the sport too much. But I understand where Frank is coming from 100%. He's disgusted with the personalities and the people involved. He's disgusted with hearing Shakur Stevenson say something to the effect, Sugar Ray Robinson maybe wasn't that good of a fighter, like mentioning he's disgusted with listening to Floyd Mayweather demeaning, other fighters like Muhammad Ali and Roy Jones. You get tired of this stuff, listening to these personalities, but it's a different crowd. I mean, I've seen things like this. A few years ago, I went to Vegas when Terrence Crawford fought Sean Porter. I didn't go on a media pass. I went with a friend of mine. A friend of mine said he wanted me to go with him. He bought me a ticket. We're in Vegas. So I'm sitting in the crowd just with, the general public. And we're leaving at the end of the night. And I'm looking around. And it wasn't a traditional boxing crowd that I had grown up with, hardcore fans. And it was a nice crowd, but it was a date crowd. Young people on dates going out, very nice and pleasant, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the hardcore boxing fan crowd that Laterzo and myself grew up on. Like when we were kids and I'd be a teenager.
The smoke-filled boxing arena?
I would take the train to the fights. I would go to the fights myself to watch them. You don't have that anymore. I couldn't find a kid in the crowd, who was like me back in the day, who just go because he loved boxing, to watch the fights and the fighters.
You're just setting up Rick Sherlock to take a shot at your age. You just know that, right? But
yeah, well.
anyway, we did
Sherlock can do that. Sherlock. I'll take a show like what Balboa said to Mason Dixon. You'll get there.
We hope we'll get there, Jack. That's all I can say. We had another big fight the third time around for Taylor and Serrano, and Taylor for the third time in another competitive fight. What are your thoughts on this fight, and do we need to see any more of this?
Something hit me like a ton of bricks this morning, okay? Jake Paul. Let's give Jake Paul tremendous credit. He was the promoter. Amanda Serrano's career could go nowhere under traditional promoters. The reason we had those big shows at the Garden, Jake Paul promoted that show.
Yeah.
He's done a tremendous job promoting, women's boxing. Tremendous. Jake Paul, to me, belongs in the Hall of Fame. If you do look at just what he's done as a promoter for women's boxing, think of it, okay? Jake Paul has been tremendous, and this was an all-women's card at Madison Square Garden. Third fight with Taylor and Serrano. The book is closed on them. 3-0 Taylor. I had Taylor winning 6 rounds to 4, 96-94, legitimately. First 2 fights could have gone either way. This fight, at best, you could argue that Serrano maybe could have been given a draw, but I don't think so. And, closes the book on the rivalry. And their name's going to be linked together. When people think of Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, they're going to be intertwined. That sometimes happens with fighters. Their legacies become attached despite all that they've done otherwise. Sometimes it benefits one fighter a lot more than the other. We think of the great Alexis Aguayo, great career, but his name is linked to Aaron Pryor, and those are 2 fights he lost. It's not the best name to, really be linked to. But so sometimes you get linked to an opponent, and like I said, it's beneficial, and other times it's not, even though it raises your profile, it's not quite what you want.
They sold out the Garden with an all-women's card, as you said, and that's not a small accomplishment. I think that's great.
That's big, but sometimes it's more than just the fight. It becomes an event that people want to go to, and Taylor Serrano became kind of like a brand. People, they put up 2 great fights the first 2 times, and it's a party atmosphere at the Garden. And, could they fight a 4th time and do well? Perhaps. But this 3rd fight, wasn't the most exciting. If you look at trilogies throughout boxing history, not all 3 fights are usually great fights, even though we tend to think that way. Ali Frazier, their 1st and 3rd fights were great fights, especially the 3rd one.
Yeah.
The 2nd fight was no more than an entertaining fight. You could say it was a good fight at most, okay? And you look at, some other contests. The Ali Norton fights weren't particularly exciting. They were okay to watch. Tony Zare, Rocky Graziano, their great 3-fight series. Their 3rd fight was one-sided in Zare's favor. Even Gatti Ward. I was at their 2nd fight in Atlantic City. It was no more than a good fight at most. At most. It wasn't a thriller like their 1st fight was, and their 3rd fight, which was a heck of a, exciting fight as well.
I'm going to put up a comment here because I don't like to ever be accused of editing out comments, and it's a question about boxing. Not a question, but a comment that boxing matches have never been appropriate for children. You think?
What's Excel be a force? But not fighting? What fighting we talking about? MMA?
Boxing. He's talking about boxing itself is not necessarily appropriate for children. He's laughing a little bit, but he does have a laughing emoji there. You see a problem with any of the violence in boxing or MMA? Because Danny talks about MMA.
No, let's cut that out. For years and years in the past, we'd hear, well, should boxing be abolished? And you point to football now. Same after effects for years down the line. Fighters get damaged because they fight too long, and fights allowed to go on too long, and they take too many punches. But we hear the argument as well in boxing, the intent is to hurt another opponent. The intent isn't to injure another opponent. It's to render him incapable of continuing at that moment, if you could. Same thing like in football. You want to stop the person with the ball. You want to render them incapable of performing anymore.
CA does give you this. He says you know more about boxing than him, but not necessarily fighting. So,
Fighting what? I don't get it.
I think like a street fight, I think is what he's talking about. So
I hope I'm not being challenged. I decline. If I'm being challenged to street fight, I'm declining.
he's challenging you. I think he's just making a comment.
Okay, okay.
Well, Danny did say something about the MMA, which I don't like myself. He doesn't like. You think MMA is really hurting boxing and will continue to?
No, I think it's a different crowd. You know, UFC, MMA, I hear that it's more popular in boxing, especially UFC with young people. But you take the biggest UFC fight and put it against the MMA, and you put it against the biggest boxing match. The biggest boxing matches are more popular. They create a bigger buzz, a greater impact.
Yeah.
You're not going to get any UFC fight that's going to be as big as, let's say, this fight with Terrence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez. You're not going to get anything that's going to compare to what Mayweather and Pacquiao was when they fought. You just don't. But on balance, you know, from everything I hear, and I'm not a UFC follower, that the UFC is more popular. And that I'd like to hear from someone who's really knowledgeable in the UFC, the personalities. Is it as vulgar with the UFC as it is with boxing? I mean, I'd like to hear some comments, because even though I've heard there's been trash talk with the UFC,
there's a lot of it.
Been as disgusting as what we get in boxing.
Yeah, that's an interesting. We'll have to get somebody's opinion who pays attention to it a little more than I guess either one of us.
We're really out of the box today, Keith. This is good. Taking a little break away from the boredom that's going on, maybe in some of the major sports that we talk about.
Yeah, some of the stuff that I had on our agenda today can hold till Friday anyway, when we won't have a lot of other stuff to talk about. So that'll be fine. I'm glad we took this time. It's been a lot of the show, and that's good. You get to shine because we get to talk about your sport, and I want to do that from time to time when we can, and it makes sense. Let's do this. I want to touch on, before we go away, I'm going to go into the All-Star game last. Let's talk real quick about Cooper Flagg, because you and I talked about Cooper Flagg and his debut in the Summer League on Friday. And then on Sunday, yesterday, we had talked about his second game where he was much improved. And suddenly the Mavs shut him down for the summer, which I don't know if it's because he's done as good as he can. We don't want him to get hurt. I would think this would be beneficial for him to keep playing these games. What are your thoughts on them shutting down suddenly?
Well, I would want to know their reason. That's what I didn't get. All I heard, they're shutting him down. What is the reason? I mean, if it's a valid reason, I'm all ears to listen. He's 18 years old. Are they scared he's going to put some wear and tear on his legs? They got to rest him for the upcoming season.
Right.
Are they feeling he can't benefit by playing anymore? Is it that they just let him play in the Summer League to expose him, for television ratings, to get his feet wet? Yeah, and there's got to be a reason behind it. But I don't want to be too critical of the Mavs, because he's going to be playing, a lot during the year, a lot of minutes. Is he going to start for the Mavs? I haven't heard them even broach that topic.
I would think he's going to, but who knows? In the beginning, they might bring him off the bench.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you have to baby Cooper Flagg or what? Look, we don't expect him to hit the ground running and become a star. He's with a very established team, and and Cooper Flagg can't be the dominant guy on that team in his rookie year when Kyrie comes back. It doesn't mean he can't be a force and can't be trending towards being a great player. I'm trying to recall Larry Bird's rookie year, because that's who Cooper Flagg is compared to, in part, let's be honest, because they're both white. Okay, a rarity of an NBA, superstar coming out of college, someone who's white, who's projected as such. I don't recall Larry Bird being a megastar in his first year. He was outstanding, but I can't recall him taking over the Celtic team and being the man in his first year. Maybe I'm wrong there. I'm just going from memory. Do you remember, Keith?
Basically, he was, because I'm trying to think who else was on that team. But they went from Dave Collins might have still been on that team, quite frankly. But
Dave Collins was right, exactly. The first when he wins on there and be the man as long as Collins was there. No. Collins, future Hall of Famer, great Celtic championship pedigree with the Celtics. And I think it's the same with Cooper Flagg, even though Dallas, doesn't have a championship team. You got the veterans. You're going to have Kyrie there, not playing in the beginning, getting over the injury. Anthony Davis, assuming he's ready to go in the beginning of the year. And you have other Klay Thompson there. And you have the other, veterans. And, pretty good depth on that team. So, and
I think that
Jason Kidd, who's a powerful personality, is the head coach.
Great point. And I think that's a good thing for Cooper Flagg not to have to take that mantle in year one, or at least day one. And Danny does say that Kidd says he is starting. So one quick to make sure, because I talked about you shining in boxing, and Rick wants to make sure that you shine in other sports as well, just despite his busting. Chops.
Appreciate it, Rick. There's a lot of sports I don't shine in, believe me.
Is very good, Rick, on taking the the abuse we heap on him sometimes, because he's good at giving it out sometimes.
I didn't know it was abuse. I'm used to hearing that in my everyday life. So I didn't realize it was abuse. Now I get a little upset.
I've been married 3 times, so I understand what abuse is.
Okay. Clark. Okay, yeah. Are we going to talk about the WNBA?
Clark more than Bird, as far as being the man. that's the person right out of the gate, I guess is what he's talking about.
Yeah, the Indiana Fever, they were a weak team last year when Caitlin Clark got there, and they played well when she was out. I don't understand the big turnaround with the Indiana Fever, but would that be good for women's basketball, have the Fever win it? In the pettiness of the women players, they rated, Caitlin Clark the 9th best guard in the WNBA, and the players. And Dick Vitale said to stop it. He sent a message to stop this nonsense. She's benefited you so much. We saw the thing. RG3 got fired because he made some remarks about Angel Reese having pure hatred, it seemed, for Caitlin Clark, and that he could tell in his opinion. But it did seem that way. Angel Reese wants to be a mega star. This isn't to say she's not a team player. I'm not saying that for one moment. And she's a tremendous player, tremendous rebounder, okay? But it seems there's a lot of jealousy there.
Do you think, and I agree with CA's comment here, and I've said this since the beginning, and I feel like the league and their marketing department plays up the racial aspect of this way too much. It doesn't need to be that, but they play it up that way, and people are going to think this is a black-white thing, and I don't think it needs to be that.
I don't think the league plays it up. The league doesn't.
Well, the media, let me say the media then. The media plays it up.
When you have something different, people take notice. If it was an all-white league and you had a dynamic black player like Michael Jordan come in, he would get the same type of buzz. And listen, I get it. Racism goes both ways. Racism plays into it definitely to a large degree, in the sense that Caitlin Clark is white, and she's the only truly white star in the league, and she's an exciting player.
Well,
how many other players have a 3-point shot? And the 3-point shot, let's face it, is the most exciting play in basketball that you could do consistently. I'm not counting the occasional slam dunk that gets the crowd riled up.
Yeah. Again, I think you just touched on it, and I was trying to get that point out that when we talk about racism, though, racism goes both ways, and I think that's part of the problem. Why she's ranked? Where did you say she was ranked? Ninth.
Come on. Is that a valid ranking?
No, it's not. And I do think that racism plays in a part of that because she's not part of their crowd, right? So, and they don't
I
hope, I don't think.
No, I don't look at it that when you say she's a rookie too, when she came in.
Not anymore.
Okay? You're not anymore. So over the years, there's going to be acceptance of Caitlin Clark. But, there's such way is going backwards too. In the NBA, we're making too big a deal out of Larry Bird, a lot of former black and, NBA players. They're going a bit overboard to try to even things out, to say, oh, Larry Bird did this, Larry Bird did that. Trying to lean over backwards. And it's because Larry Bird is white and he's getting more attention than he should at this stage. I know Larry Bird did legendary things, so we hear former players talk a lot more about Larry Bird than they do Magic Johnson. And Magic had his great exploits behind the back passes and this and that. It's what is.
You made a great point about Caitlin Clark with the word petty and what they're doing, what these other players tried to kind of diminish her a bit. All I know is without Caitlin Clark, when Caitlin Clark comes into an arena, it's filled. And then the next night when somebody else comes through, the place has got, 25% full. That's all I need to know about how short-sighted these players are, that this woman is very important to her league, like some other people we've talked about on this show.
Yeah, one good thing about doing this show, Keith, that we're not that big yet. Because the worst thing that could happen to me is I get fired. And if I get fired from this show, I'm not losing my $1 million contract like someone on a major network where I would be a little more conservative to talk. But if you notice in the Caitlin Clark situation, the great black, the male black players, they praise her to the hilt, like LeBron James.
Yeah.
He's a big Caitlin Clark fan booster. They praise Caitlin Clark, how great she is, how wonderful she is for the league. It's the black women, who play in the WNBA. But in fairness to them, I can understand where they're coming from. This is their league. They've take the WNBA. They have a lot of pride in the league in what they do, and they see this white girl come and get all the attention, and they're thinking, this isn't fair. Why aren't we getting the attention? Why is everyone making a big deal over her? And then you see an Angel Reese, who, even though she's a team player, she wants to stand out as a megastar in her own right. And there's nothing wrong with that. But she has, it seems to me,
yourself.
This resentment towards Caitlin Clark and all, even though she's going to deny it. You kind of feel it. And Caitlin Clark is keeping her mouth shut very smartly, not wanting to get caught in any of this controversy, at all.
She's smart, but again, these other players are very short-sighted because they want bigger salaries. They want more, and that's not going to come without more eyeballs on your sport. And Caitlin Clark brings more eyeballs into their sport, and I think that's the way it needs to be. So, Danny says he watched 2 minutes. I guess we're going to finish up with the WNBA today. You watched 2 minutes of the game, and you won't.
No, Danny. No, Danny. They can't listen. They're not going to be as good as the men, the women. They're not. You watch it within its context of the WNBA. The best high school male team in the country would beat the WNBA champions, okay? If you put the best high school team possibly you can together, but it doesn't diminish the WNBA and the entertainment and what they bring to the table. Watch it within its own context.
Good morning, Ralph Williams. Danny does say, we're the big boom. And Jack, if you get fired, he'll go back to sleeping in on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, I would be more conservative if I were on ESPN and all. I'm not as courageous as it seems talking about things.
Just for our last couple of minutes, because I guess we should touch on it. And we beat it to death anyway. The All-Star game's tomorrow night. The home run derby's tonight. Does anybody care? There's no star power in this home run derby. Why are we even watching? Why is it even on? And
even if there's star power, I don't care with the home run derby and all this. You know, I proposed this to you in the past, Keith. You know, I care about the All-Star game if there was something on the line. In the past, all you needed on the line was pride. The American League and National League both wanted to win. I was a big American League fan. And it used to break my heart in my youth year after year with the National League winning. But now the American and National League has lost its concept. It doesn't mean anything, American League and National League. I mean, it just doesn't. And this game is just an exhibition game. Who cares who wins? Let the winning team, every player, get $1 million. The losing team, no money. And I might get interested in watching. Wow, they're playing for big money. And don't tell me a million. I don't care how much money you're making. $1 million is a lot. Could you imagine Juan Soto not getting his bonus and $1 million? You know, would you forgive Juan Soto more, Keith, if he said, of course I wanted to be in the All-Star game. I wanted a chance to win the $1 million. We wouldn't hold that against him. Because he would be competing for the $1 million.
That'd be different. He'd be out there trying to win. Yes, that'd be different.
Yeah, I want to win this game, and I want to get that $1 million. And he'd laugh, and we'd all laugh along with him.
Alex Cora said, I think yesterday or the day before, that the game would have more prestige if we went back to having like 25-man rosters instead of 40-man rosters. There's too many players. And too many players don't want to play. I read another article this morning that talked that Major League Baseball went to 17 different pitchers who said, no, we don't want to pitch.
That's unbelievable, you know. And they'll regret it later on. Because I told you the story, Al Leiter, he turned down an All-Star bid because he wanted to go on vacation and so on. And now he said it would have looked so much better on my resume to have that extra All-Star appearance. You know, it bothered him. Let's say your pitchers make 3 All-Star teams. You have a chance to have gone to 4, and you turn it down, and you look at your resume, I'm a 3-time All-Star, and then you think, I should have been a 4th-time. I should have gone.
Rick wants to see the big dumpster. Who is for some reason, I don't know who the big dumpster is. Who is the big dumpster? I'm going to guess it might be Cal Raleigh, but I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. I think that would be my guess,
too. I can find out here.
Where does Cal Raleigh come from? I mean, man, he's a monster with all those
he had a decent career up until now. Always a good defensive catcher. Never hit for any average, a bit of power, but he's come out of nowhere to have 38 home runs at the break. And big story.
Yeah, by the way, we're going to close any moment. The Yankees drafted a shortstop. And considering George Lombard, who's already a shortstop in their minor league system, is their best position prospect, you kind of wonder, you know, what that means for Anthony Volpe going down in the future, unless they'll make Volpe a second baseman, a third baseman, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about the Yankees, Mets, and the rest of baseball, because, again, we don't want to concentrate just on the Yankees and Mets on Friday in the second half of the season, if you will. Maybe a little bit more in the draft. My big takeaway from the draft was I was shocked that Holiday or Kennedy, Anderson, the pitcher from LSU, didn't get picked one or two. They both went 3 and 4. I'm very shocked at that, quite frankly, but we'll get into more of that on Friday. Great show today, Jack. You know, as you said, a little bit outside of the box, but a lot of fun and back and forth and good. Listen, great input from the peanut gallery on 2 sports we don't always talk about. So
yeah, you know, the people out there, they know what they're talking about. Actually, the ones that watch this show.
We have the most intelligent fans in the podcasting world, I can tell you right now. Great job, guys. Great job, Jack. Thank you, Jack. I'll see you Friday morning. I'll see you guys on the National Streaming Sports Professional Sports Show, whatever the hell we call Wednesday night show. I'll see you guys then at 6, and you guys have a great week. Keith Engel for Jack Hirsch. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
7 o'clock tonight, Bluff Fist, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tune in.
My bad. I forgot about that. Thank you, Jack. Bye-bye.